This video is going to be a little bit different because I'm actually going to talk about my personal statement, which is what I wrote when I was applying to college back in 2018. Anywho, so I have not read my essay since then, and I'm not looking forward to reading it because I know I'm probably going to cringe a little bit, but hey, it got me to where I am today, Duke 2023. No, so I'm really happy about that, and I worked really hard on it. I'm just really excited to share my essay with you guys because I'm really proud of it. It's something that I've already published on like my blog before and things like that. But I've seen that people read it out loud on YouTube videos to traumatize themselves. I'm not really sure why, so I guess that's what I'm going to be doing to myself today. I do want to provide background on the creative process that went into making my essay because I feel like that's also really helpful instead of just reading it, because you want to know how did the person get to that point. So I think we're going to cut to reading it first now, and then I'll go into the details of how I created it afterwards.
All right, hello. So this is the official document that my essay was written in, and I chose to keep the brainstorming in the same document when I was writing my essay. These are just all of my notes. I guess I can talk about them later, but let's read it, shall we? Um, so the question that I chose to respond to, or the prompt that I chose to respond to, was describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? And this was my essay. The math world is all too familiar with the irreverent question, when will I ever use this in real life? Despite the fact our airplane had turned around for an emergency, I managed to fall asleep. Whether it was due to the early departure time or lack of oxygen, I wasn't sure. My favorite book that I've read for school is Jurassic Park. This isn't surprising because when I grew up, I wanted to be a paleontologist. Yet, reading Jurassic Park provided more for me than a good read and a childhood dream. It opened up a world of fundamentals that we often overlook and I've grown to love. In July 2016, I was excited to embark on a family trip to visit the United States' own tropical island, Puerto Rico. Like Dr. Grant's, our plane took off in the dim light of early morning. If I squinted hard enough, I could see dinosaurs roaming through the sky. Aside from the motivational motif of life finds a way, Jurassic Park highlights the simple complexity of mathematics. Ian Malcolm showcases a world of order within chaos by introducing fractals, invisible numbers, patterns, and ratios that form our dynamic living system, which we don't conventionally learn about in school. This was significantly more interesting than honors geometry, inspiring me to research self-similarity and explore what it means to be mathematically rough. I learned how impactful the small, delicate butterfly is. Now I'm able to pick out the beauty in the repeated curves and shells, the engineered snowflakes, and the billowy clouds that decorate the sky. On that day, the clouds were dark and bulbous, giving an ominous foreshadowing of the day's events. An hour into our flight, the seatbelt lights loudly flashed on. In unforgettable moments later, an oxygen mask frantically dropped in front of me. Startled, I looked around, thinking it was a system malfunction, but it wasn't. The pilot came on, but a hurricane of fear crashed over me, and my ears thundered with wonder if I would die. Ever since learning about fractals, I've retained my initial awe. I often break into lecture when I see an interesting pattern in nature's statistics. Over time, I've discovered that fractals tell us that fate is real, at least to an extent. Factors from earlier in the morning, a few years ago, or even a couple epochs in the past point to the outcomes of the future. I looked toward my youngest sister to help her put on her mask while taking short breaths of my own. I looked at my parents to make sure we were okay, but the usual reassurance was not there. I needed to stop panicking. I paused to reflect on what I knew about airplanes. Was air really necessary? I desperately racked my brains, and then it hit me. I had read about aerodynamics in Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell earlier that summer. One statistic reverberated in my head. The typical accident involves 7 consecutive human errors. I began counting factors that could cause human error. 1, we had 10 minutes to reach a lower altitude to equalize pressure. 2, there were a lot of clouds. 3, it was too early in the morning. 4, turning around disrupts air traffic control. 5, how cool can we really keep under pressure or lack thereof? There were only 5. I watched Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom this summer and was stunned to find Ian Malcolm giving the accidents aren't really accident spiel. Memories of the frightening plane came flooding back, and I bawled in the theater. In that moment, I felt as if you were talking to me, and in that moment, I knew I desperately wanted to create my own fractal, to use one small, chaotic pen stroke to create something massive in my future, like the butterfly. To answer the original question, math simply is real life, but my real life is not simple. That's the end of my essay.
Hi, and we're back. Okay, so it wasn't as, like, reading through it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it's still, like, there are a lot of surprises. I don't know if you guys saw my facial expressions, like, oh, why did I write that? Or, like, I didn't even remember writing some parts. I remember there was a part in the beginning where I was missing a comma after the word yet, and I can't like, maybe I read it wrong when I was reading through, or, like, that's, I don't know if that was intentional or not, and I don't know if that's, I don't think that's what I submitted on the official application. I hope not. Whatever. That was something that I noticed just now. That made it a little bit difficult to read. And the other thing that jumped out at me was that I kind of forgot timestamps, which I think I had them in the original, like in earlier drafts of my essay. And what I mean by timestamps are like when things were happening. So I think this was how, like, the plane crash that I was kind of jumping back and forth between happened in between freshman and sophomore year that summer. And because of word count, I guess I had cut that out. And I also cut out the fact that in 8th grade is when I learned about fractals and things like that, which I think would have been helpful to include for readers to have like a timestamp of when these things were occurring, because it kind of seems like everything was happening either simultaneously or like back to back to back. Yeah, that's something that I would have fixed back in the time, but I'm happy that I wrote about it, and I'm happy about the way that I wrote about it, just because I am a nerd. Peep the Death Star shirt and the matching galaxy makeup. So Jurassic Park is my favorite movie of all time. It's my favorite book, and it is my favorite because of like the whole fractal reason, and just dinosaurs in general I loved. And it was true that I wanted to be a paleontologist when I was a kid, which I mentioned in the earlier paragraphs. That reminds me of a technique that I kind of employed in my Common App essay, and I employed in a lot of supplementals, which I consider to be my own voice, which was using language on purpose that isn't grammatically correct, or which sounds bad, but like in the context of like I had all A's in school, I had really good strong extracurriculars, Common App, blah blah blah. I showed that I knew what I was doing, and I think I did it in a tasteful way in a lot of places, where I would choose oxymorons or things that would jump out at you right away to kind of draw the reader in more, I guess. So one instance that I did that is when I was talking in the present tense, but I said, when I grew up, I wanted to be a paleontologist. And I felt like that was also the most workout friendly way that I could say, when I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a paleontologist when I grew up. But I was able to say that in a lot less words and kind of like move on from that fact while still getting that in there. I'm back again. I know you guys probably, I just keep forgetting stuff. And I know you guys probably love this angle, but one thing that I realized that I didn't talk about, which is like a kind of like really glaring thing about my essay that I just forgot to mention, is like how it's staggered and between like present and past tense, and like how I used italics to show that. So I think that, again, it was something that I chose to do, even though some English teachers did not like it. Some people really, really loved it. But the reason that I did it that way is because that's kind of how I think. I'm a very parallel thinker, where I think of like two different things at the same time and then draw the connection, as opposed to a linear thinker where I think of everything in order and then like come to the conclusion at the end. So I wanted to like reflect the chaoticness of the situation, as well as like accurately reflect like what felt natural in terms of telling the story for me, because I did write it down in the order of events that it occurred. Funnily enough, even though it seems very out of order, that's the way that everything went down, and that's how like my whole experience unfolded. So I wanted to accurately write that in that way. And yeah, okay, that's it. I thought in my head, it was a lot more personal to me than I think came across on the paper. And I think that's something that I wish other people kind of hinted at me more, and maybe they did, and I was very much in my head. So I'm like, what do you mean? This is literally bleeding me. I'm talking about fractals, I'm talking about dinosaurs. These are things that I love, and I'm talking about a real experience that happened to me. That was a really good way for me to go about that, and I just really needed to be a little, like, having more specific timestamps and getting rid of the teachable moments. Like, I feel like I took more than a few moments to like teach about what fractals were in my essay, and that was something that I didn't need to do, because again, that doesn't help readers get to know me as much. As well as the conclusion, I wish I had written that so that it was a bit more personalized, as opposed to falling back onto like the concept of fractals and why I liked those. So I'll admit that like the way that I tried to personalize my conclusion was that last ditch sentence where I said, but my real life is not simple. And that was honestly, it was November 1st at that point, or maybe October 31st, and I had to submit my early application. I felt like it was done, and all I needed was like that last like conclusion moment. And honestly, I love one-liners. Conclusions, as we know in English class, have no place really in college essays, and the reason being for that is because in those conclusions we're taught to recap everything that we said already and just say it in new words. And in a college essay, that's wasting like a fifth of your 650 words saying stuff that you had already said. So the best way to conclude a college essay is to use the conclusion of the experience that you're talking about. Like, however the experience or topic or passion or relationship that you're writing about, however that was naturally resolved in your life, or however it's naturally progressing to a resolution, is what you want to write about. So for me, it was the summer as I was writing this essay, the summer as I was applying, I watched the movie Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom. And when I was watching that movie is when I realized that this thing that I've fallen in love with so much helped me be calm and get through this other moment in my life that happened years prior, that I didn't cry after that happened. I have not explained it as well as I should have, but basically we were flying to go on vacation, and the door of the airplane was left open, and it like didn't have a seal, so it couldn't close all the way, but they didn't figure that out until like halfway on the flight there. And so they literally only had 10 minutes to bring the plane to a lower altitude before everyone in the airplane, including the pilot, passed out. So that was really scary, and like a lot of people on the plane were freaking out. And when it landed, there were news reporters who interviewed my family and interviewed a lot of other people on the plane, like, oh my gosh, are you guys okay, and yada yada. So like it was a pretty big deal, and I didn't think about it that much because I'm like, oh, but we're fine, blah blah blah. So it wasn't really until I had watched that movie, and in the movie Ian Malcolm reappears, and he was talking about how accidents are actually mathematically fabricated in the universe and predicted to an extent, and so they're kind of meant to happen in a way if they do happen or if they don't happen. And that kind of like mathematical logic and the logic that I gained from Outliers, which a lot of people talk about in their essays, honestly. I feel like every single one of us think that we're unique when we like name drop Outliers, but it's really a book that everyone reads. But it's fine because it was very relevant and truthful to like what I was experiencing. So I think that is one thing that my essay shows about me really well in terms of the show don't tell, because I did not write any sentence that explicitly stated I love math, or I'm a mathematical person, or I'm a logical person, or I love to do things systematically. But I think talking about what my thought process, through my experience, talking about what my thought processes were, really explains that to your reader and helps them to get to know me in that way. And I think it also based on my writing style and what I chose to write about kind of communicates, oh, this person's really nerdy, really quirky, and also really likes math. Okay. And they get to know me through this experience to see how I interact with the world. And I feel like that was something that's really beneficial about my essay. Okay, so thank you guys for watching. In a future video, I'll definitely talk more about like the actual events that led up to how I was able to put things down on paper and how I brainstormed. But I felt like this was already getting really long, a lot longer than expected, because I wanted to focus on a lot more of the elements that I included and kind of the thought processes behind those certain elements and the effects that I think that those had. Feel free to leave comments down below on what you guys think, or if you have any questions for me. And thank you for watching. Please hit like and subscribe. Bye.